it's killing me.
All right. Well, we just had a great conversation with the three of us, and now it's just the two of us, just Hawksley, Workman, and I. And let's be very clear, a fabulous hutch behind you. I want to give a shout out to the maker of that hutch.
Yes, my wife's grandfather, I think, made this hutch.
So that'll last forever because they made things to last.
They did. Yes, this was imperative.
And if you ever do an album, not saying I need any cut of this, but if you do one and this is the cover, Hawksley and Hutch is what I would like. What I'd like to call.
Hawksley and Hutch. Yeah, I like that.
Now I'd given you a request to perform. You've been sitting there very patiently with your guitar this whole time. So is it all right if you give us a song and then we chat?
Yeah, absolutely. No, I'm looking forward to playing this, actually.
Thanks, brother.
It's Ukulele Boy, as requested by Steve Patterson. Ukulele boy, ukulele boy, coming down the mountainside, a hair of curls, he rides a tiger. Ukulele boy, ukulele boy, ukulele boy. You bat your eyes so shy and coyish, kind of girlish, kind of boyish. Ukulele boy, ukulele boy, ukulele boy. He looks a lot like a lady, but with a 5 o'clock shady. I don't know. Ukulele boy. Tell me, have you seen my Lord coming down the mountainside? He comes to us in flesh and blood, from the womb inside of Zeus's thigh. Tell me, have you seen my Lord, master of fertility, breathing life into an actor's lines, wetting women's loins with ecstasy? Tell me, have you seen my Lord, with his fellowship of lust and joy? The very sight of him intoxicates you and makes you want to walk a talk a look like a smoke a hookah, maybe lick a, maybe suck a. Maybe you could use a ukulele boy, ukulele boy. Come on, I wanna lay you. Tell me, honey, what you saying? Ukulele boy, ukulele boy, ukulele boy. Do you have a swollen labia or a knobby old shillelagh? Ukulele boy. Oh, mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord.
Yes! Are you kidding me? If we do nothing else ever on this show, this was worth it right there. That was so awesome, buddy. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I'm heartened that you like that so much. It's
I like the whole thing. I saw it live. I was your guest. Thank you. The God That Comes. And like a one-man rock opera.
Yeah.
And that song is in the context of everything. It's part of the story. The reason I listen to it a lot, weekly at least. And I started to, my 5-year-old daughter got a ukulele when we were in Iceland on a trip.
Oh,
and she was playing some ukulele, and I thought I should play Ukulele Boy. Not even thinking maybe these lyrics aren't right for a 5-year-old, but I still love it. I love it, man, and I think it encapsulates the artist that you are. You're funny. You'll do anything in a song, and lyrically amazing, and just so fun, and but also sexy. A lot of sexy references in there.
Yeah, thanks. I feel like I've had, I don't know about you as a comedian, but I feel like I've been talking a lot on stage about, when your audience and you kind of fall in love with each other, you're at the beginning of your sort of adult lives. And like for rock and roll, like you usually find the music that is going to be the soundtrack to your life when you're in your 20s. and I wrote some sexy libidinous songs when I was in my 20s. And now that I'm on stage at 45, singing about how hot I might be or might not be, or how sexy things are, it does feel, it feels more cumbersome coming out of me now. It's like,
Well,
there's a shelf life on sexy songs, you know?
Well, tell Tom Jones that, buddy. If you saw him, you'd throw him your own underwear. So that's staying power.
Yeah.
It's interesting you say that, because one of your big hits from last year, well, the album, The Battlefords, but especially the single from it, is about childhood. It's a story of childhood. So you kind of went back and started writing about your childhood. Is this why you were afraid you weren't sexy enough? Because you still are, by the way. But
thank you. I feel like, well, you know, the other thing in rock and roll too, there's your currency is your youth and your beauty, and especially when rock and roll happened as a video component on TV, like how cute or beautiful or sexy you were to look at was a big part of like your potential longevity. And I think though at 45 now, I feel like I put out 17 or 18 records. I've toured a lot. I've done stuff, and I all of a sudden I have a calm about my career all of a sudden that is kind of, it's nice, because I again, like you and I have talked about comedians before in the past over beers and stuff, and I'm a fan of comedy, a fan of comedians, and I'm not entirely sure if the nuts and bolts elements of building careers is necessarily the same, but definitely at 45, I felt a breath. I took a first breath in all these years, 21 years, and thought maybe this thing isn't going away. Maybe I have a career that's gonna keep working, you know, and I don't have to always be worried about it. And that sort of bought me a little bit of time to be reflective, I think. And then all of a sudden, there's this feeling like, well, here we were just talking with Amber about the future and about Zoom and about the state of that we're in. And I wanted to look back.
I'm sorry to laugh. A train just went by right outside my window. I'm to be honest, it might have looked like a small earthquake on screen, but sort of a nice sign that trains are still running, right? It means somebody's still up there. Yeah, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off there.
All good. I was just going to say that all of a sudden the 1980s feel like they must have looked pretty rinky-dink, even though we were being told that was the future, video games, AstroTurf, you know, synthesizers. But really, it wasn't all that, like, we're now living in the future. This is it. We're
all home and we can't leave. Yeah,
exactly.
Well, I you know, I keep referencing that hutch behind you, but
yeah,
you know, you listen to. My wife got me a turntable, which I hadn't had a turntable in a while. I mean, she got me a turntable last Christmas, and if you're going to go buy an album for a turntable, you're going to go buy an album that you had, you know, when albums were the only thing. Like I bought Led Zeppelin 4 right out of the gate and some Genesis albums, totally, because that's what I remember listening to. And there's a tactile experience to doing it. You sit down, you read the liner notes, the lyrics are there sometimes. So maybe, you know, in many ways we're kind of, maybe this is good that we've had this pause in everything, and now you're seeing the talent that has to come out when it's just a person in their instrument playing in a room. There's no special effects or anything. It's about the music, and I for one would like to see a return to that.
Well, I think that's true. It's funny. And again, you know, I'm in many ways more interested in your career than I am in mine, because in a way I feel like I read something last year that really shook me, which was that comedy is like the last real rebel art form. And what I will say is that music has turned into a corporate affair. And I think music was always a corporate affair, but more than ever, I feel like there's this sense that, we have access to the whole world because of the internet now, but there's almost less gatekeepers or something. I feel like music used to feel more handmade. So this idea of comedy, though, as something that you can't lip sync, like, and that I was watching the Seinfeld Comedians in Cars thing, and the thing about comedy, I mean, you're either funny or you're not, which is a ridiculous thing to say, but people either laugh or they don't. Like, in some ways, a lot of people can pick up a guitar and write a song. Writing a song's easy. That's verse, chorus, bridge, chorus. You know that if you repeat something 3 or 4 times, it becomes a hook, quote unquote, and it should be singable just by repetition alone. But in the comedy world, like this feels like this tech thing and where we're headed, this could be a real thing. Like, do you feel that among you and your comedy pals? Like, that somehow, and I've asked you this before, but now that we're on screen, it's interesting to me because comedy seems, and Netflix has made it important. Like, what is going on in comedy? Are you feeling that there's a moment of opportunity here?
Well, there's an opportunity, and now there's been a survival enforced upon us. I think comedians, that are relying on going to clubs with a couple hundred people in them every weekend. That's not an option for the foreseeable future. And how do you replicate that? We started to talk about this with Amber, but first of all, I disagree that anyone can pick up a guitar and write a song. You can do that many times, but I can't, and many people can't. So you've got a gift, and don't discard it, because, and maybe anyone can sing a song, but a lot of them aren't good. I mean, when you're in the Maritimes and a guy pulls out a guitar, it's time to stay. When you're in Toronto and a guy pulls out, it's time to go. But for comedians, there are the rebellious ones out there. But you got to be funny above all, as you're saying. And I'll be honest, if I didn't do the corporate type things that I do, then this would be a really, really tough time for me. And all the comedians that are getting by, be it stand-up, sketch comedians, or improv artists, there's nowhere to perform for live audiences right now. And the audience is our instrument. And that's what's really difficult, is to do a set to a screen, pretending this pencil is a microphone. It's pretty tough to replicate that atmosphere, and people always ask me, how do you practice your comedy? And you practice it at clubs. I mean, the wall can't tell you if you're funny. So this is a really tough time, I think, to be a comedian. And again, I do think it has at least leveled the playing field somewhat. There are great festivals that aren't going to be able to go ahead, and the comedians are going to have to find a way to try to engage the audience through the screen as much as they would at a live show. And it is a challenge, because I've seen the Netflix specials, a lot of them, and some are good and a lot are not. And, we can get the comedy out there, but we can't all make it funny. So I think this is the time to step up for comedians who are really funny and really have something to say. You've got to put yourself out there right now with all the others that are putting out comedy that's not as good. And that's no offense to anyone in particular, but you know who you are. Now, you were on tour with Sarah Slean when the world changed and this thing came around us, and you guys had a lot of dates lined up. How has it been? Have you been in contact with Sarah about this? Yeah.
I mean, it's funny, we were waiting for the city of Ottawa to give their official shutdown on our show. So I was in Paris, Ontario, Sarah was in Toronto, and we drove to Ottawa like good little devoted career type people, knowing that it was going to be canceled, but without an official word. As we had been hired for the night and had to show up to work. And literally, as we pull in the parking lot to the venue in Ottawa, they say, yeah, it's officially over now. So we turned around and drove home. I think the state of, I know for a lot of friends of mine, as it became obvious that we weren't going to sell CDs and vinyl records and things in the kind of way that used to pay the bills to some degree, there was always this sense, well, we could just go to the road, just go play a show. Why not just go play a show? And to have the precarious nature of that suddenly exposed in such like an eerie and terrifying kind of way. I mean, I am having conversations with my pals, and the state of work in general around the world, I think, is going to change. I think it's not just, it's all of our industries. It's everybody. I think the idea of work and the value of human labor, like, is an ever-changing. It's obvious now that it's so in flux that we're all looking at it going, what is the value of our sweat? What is the value of any of this? It's one of the things that when Andrew Yang, who was running to head up the Democratic Party in the US, when I saw him come out of the woodwork last year, I thought his thoughts on the future of work were absolutely astounding. And I'd never even considered that, you know, retail and trucking, which employ so many people, you know, they're on their way out. And even I think that I was talking to my brother, who's kind of a smart guy, the other day, who was saying that this blip in human history is going to really move the needle towards people ordering things online, and kind of probably puts the brick and mortar narrative 10 years ahead of where it was only 3 weeks ago. And it's, I mean, I think, you know, you and I are interesting people with our funny little jobs that we do. But I think there's still a, what?
I like to think so. Yeah. You know, my wife might disagree with you, but
I think that, like, I think there's still a value for us. I feel like we're so early into this, and I'm even sitting at home wondering, like, yeah, what the hell are we going to do? Are people going to want to gather in rooms again? How long will that take before people are comfortable with that? Like, I mean, even hearing a cough in an audience, like, that used to be something I could make a joke about, like, oh, you know, sneeze, bless you, ha ha ha. And now it's like, that's,
get him out. Yeah.
pity the person who sneezes in an audience. Like, holy.
I don't know where we're headed, because no one does, but I do believe that, you know, the arts, whatever they are extremely important, and it's a type of escape that people are looking for right now, right? So, please, buddy, please keep writing. I believe that we are going to get back out there, but you know, tide us over until we can with, if you would, with live serenades from the hutch, if I could come back to that. Let me just do a couple rapid fire questions for you.
Sure.
Well, this is not a real rapid fire question, but I do want to know, before I forget, I would love to have you help program my show, and tell me about a next musician that I should have on. And even if it's someone that maybe the rest of the country or the rest of the world hasn't heard of yet, but maybe they should. Get some suggestions for me?
Yeah, when you had asked, I mean, a couple come to mind right off the top of my head. And one is actually a music industry veteran, but whose career, I mean, he's a hero of mine, and I feel like the whole world should know about him. His name is John Southworth, and he's a Toronto artist. And there was a moment in the 90s where he became very, very visible and famous. And he was the first guy I toured with as a drummer when I was younger. I think he is brilliant beyond measure. And I think John Southworth is a guy who has an interesting mind and an interesting way of seeing things. And in some ways, Ukulele Boy, like, he was somebody I got to hang around with a lot when I had first moved to Toronto as a kid. And, you know, he was kind of one of those talisman for how weird could you be, you know, and Southworth is that weird. So, and the other one I was thinking of is Colleen Brown, who is an artist who now lives in Toronto. But she's from Edmonton, or from Alberta. And she put out a record called Foot in Heart about 10 or 12 years ago that I thought was arguably some of the best songwriting I've ever heard anywhere, but especially out of Canada. And we loved her so much. My wife and I were falling in love to her record, and we had a small wedding, but we'd sort of set aside a budget to fly Colleen Brown in to sing our favorite song at our wedding. I think she's somebody that people should be paying attention to. She's got one of those voices that's just kind of, it's iconic right out of the gate, and she's a powerful songwriter.
All right, we're gonna try to track them down. Thank you for helping me program my show. What's in that thermos? That's my last question.
Just tea. I haven't had a drink in 6 months, 3 weeks.
Wow, good for you. Is that by design, or?
It didn't. Yeah, I guess.
No, that is good for you, man. It's I applaud it. You know, we're at the point in our lives when, if you tell people taking a break from drinking, it used to, up till maybe last week with my friends, it'd be like, what's wrong with you? You're an idiot. But now it's like, oh, that's probably a good decision when you can't leave keep your house and do any exercise.
Is it as important to the comedy community? Like alcohol is kind of like, it's part of the archetype of being a rock and roll musician, you know, like drinking and playing rock music is what it is, you know?
Well, yeah, in comedy, imagine that, but without any of the esteem. You're just a person in the back of the room getting drunk by yourself because you didn't come with a band. You're just there by yourself. And
Right.
so, more sad in comedy, really. Listen, man, thank you so much for helping me on this first episode. I couldn't think of a better guest.
This has really got me excited. My brain is racing now. I think that you're doing something special.
Well, thank you very much, brother. Appreciate it so much. Thank you so much for doing that particular song for me.
Oh, man. My pleasure. Thanks for the request.
We'll talk to you again soon, man. Cheers.
All right. Take care.
I'm living downtown. I'm living downtown. I'm living downtown. And it's killing me.